Hello everyone and welcome to lesson 9.2B. I've entitled this video, Washington's Challenges in Europe. This video is going to cover pages 254 to 255. Problems with Europe. In 1789, France erupted in revolution. Americans cheered at first as the French rose up against their king. The French struggle against royal tyranny was familiar to them. By 1793, however, the revolution had turned terribly violent, as shown here in this picture. Lots of beheadings going on. Some Americans were horrified by the bloodshed. Public opinion became divided. When Britain and France went to war in 1793, some Americans sympathized with France. Others supported Britain. Washington hoped that the United States could stay neutral and not take either side. Question number 1. What European country had a revolution in 1789? France. Question number 2. Americans were originally for the French Revolution. However, by 1793, public opinion on it was split. Why? Well, the revolution had turned quite violent. And so people were like, is that going so well there or no? Not sure. So it kind of split public opinion here in America. Question 3. What two European countries went to war in 1793? Britain and France. They had been very much rivals, as you can tell over and over again. You could see these two going to war and trying to get us involved. Question 4. Which side in this European conflict did President Washington want America to take? He wanted to stay neutral, which means not picking a side. Washington struggles to stay neutral. Staying neutral proved difficult. The French tried to draw the United States into their conflict with Britain. They sent Edmond Genet to ask American volunteers to attack British ships. President Washington issued the Proclamation of Neutrality, which kept Americans from fighting in the war. The proclamation also barred French and British warships from American ports. Question number 5. Why did the French send Edmond Genet to America at that time? They were trying to get us to attack British ships to help their efforts. Since they had helped us in our Revolutionary War against the British, they were hoping they would get our help in their fight against Britain. Makes sense. Question 6. What was the Neutrality Proclamation? This was what President Washington stated that America's policy would be, our foreign policy with this, and it said we, Americans, could not fight in the war. And it also said French and British ships would not be allowed in American ports if they were warships. Britain also challenged Washington's desire for neutrality. The British captured American ships that traded with the French. Then they forced the American crews into the British Navy. Americans were outraged by this practice of impressment. Question number 7. How did the British mess with the Americans during that time? Well, they were capturing some of our sailors on American ships that were just trading with France, and they forced them to join their ships as sailors in that crew. And that was called impressment. And question 8, what was the practice of impressment at that time in history? That was when people would be captured by the British, for example, and then forced, as sailors, forced to fight on their ships in war, even though they had been peacetime sailors. Washington sent John Jay, Chief Justice of the United States, to discuss a solution with the British. The result of this negotiation was called Jay's Treaty. In this treaty, the British agreed to withdraw from American soil. There was no mention of impressment or British interference with American trade. Question number 9. Who did Washington send to Britain to work out a solution? The Chief Justice of our Supreme Court, John Jay. Question number 10. What was Jay's treaty? Well, Jay's treaty was the results of sending John Jay to Britain. He was able to get the British to agree to withdraw from American soil. And so a little bit of negotiation took place, and we didn't get the best deal, but we did get a deal, and it kept us out of war. However, few Americans approved of this treaty. Washington also found fault with it, but believed it would end the crisis. After fierce debate, the Senate approved Jay's treaty in a close vote. And you can see in this political cartoon that John Jay was being burned as an effigy. That was a word we got back when the British were being burned at the stake with their effigies by the tax collectors during the Boston Tea Party and such. So here we see another example of Americans showing their displeasure with Jay's Treaty. Question number 11. How did most Americans view Jay's Treaty? Well, that political cartoon says it all. They did not like it. Question 12. While he wasn't completely satisfied with Jay's Treaty, why was President Washington still satisfied with what he did? Because he believed that would end the crisis with Britain and keep us neutral, and that was Washington's goal as president, is to keep America out of wars he didn't believe we could fight at that time. He didn't believe we had the resources or the manpower to make it happen. Question 13. According to the United States Constitution, which group of people has the power to approve treaties in our country? So see, he could send Jay over there to make the treaty, but in order to approve the treaty, you have to have the United States Senate. The answer is the Senate. They have the power to approve treaties. Pinckney's treaty with Spain. Spanish leaders were nervous about Jay's treaty. They feared that the United States and Great Britain would now work together against Spain in North America. Washington sent U.S. diplomat Thomas Pinckney to Spain to settle differences between the nations. In 1795, Pinckney's treaty gave the Americans free navigation of the Mississippi River and the right to trade at New Orleans. Question number 14. What was Spain worried about with Jay's treaty? Like, why were they worried? Well, they were worried that because we were getting along with Great Britain with this treaty, they were worried that now we were going to work with Great Britain against Spain in the land they had here in North America. And that was all that land west of the Mississippi River and Florida. Question number 15. What did Pinckney's treaty accomplish for the United States? It got two things for us. Well, actually, you could say it got us three things. One, it established friendly relations between America and Spain. That was in the picture there. But from the text, it said we were given the ability to navigate the Mississippi River free of the Spanish trying to mess with us, and we had the right to trade at New Orleans. Washington leaves office. After 8 years in office, Washington decided not to seek a third term as president. In his farewell address, Washington urged his fellow citizens to, quote, observe good faith and justice toward all nations. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances. These parting words influenced the nation's foreign policy for more than 100 years. Washington also warned against something he saw as a growing threat to the young nation: political parties. You will read about this threat in the next lesson. Question number 16. One of the many precedents that Washington set as president was how long to serve. How many terms did he serve as president, and how many total years would that be? 2 terms for a total of 8 years. He did not seek a third term. And this was a precedent that was followed from George Washington all the way to a president named Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR. And you won't get to learn much about him this year, but he served as the longest serving president ever. He was elected 4 terms, but he died in his 4th term. But that is a precedent that Washington set, and the only president that broke that was FDR. So every other president other than FDR has only served up to 2 terms because of the precedent that Washington set. Question 17. What do we call the letter that Washington wrote to the American people as he was leaving office? We call that the farewell address. Question 18. In his farewell address, what advice did Washington give the country about foreign policy that would guide us for over 100 years? He said, don't get involved in permanent alliances. Steer clear of those. Like, make sure America does what is best for America and doesn't get locked into fighting wars because we have some sort of agreement with other countries. In question 19, in his farewell address, what warning did Washington give the country about what he saw as a growing threat to our success? He saw political parties as a threat to our success. Well, thank you for watching. Instead of a meme today, I wanted to close out every time we are done with the president. I want to leave like a little thing about them and put their ranking. So George Washington is considered to be the 2nd greatest president of American history. Only Abraham Lincoln is considered higher than him, according to historians. And George Washington was tapophobic, which means irrationally terrified of being buried alive. Back then, people were worried that they could get buried alive and then they would be in their coffin scratching, trying to get out. And on his deathbed, he told his attendants, I'm just going, have me decently buried, and do not let my body be put in the vault in less than 3 days after I'm dead. Do you understand? So he wanted his corpse to be left out for 3 days just to make sure he wasn't buried alive, which was a very common, actually, surprisingly, a very common fear that people had back then at that time. Well, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.